How does this constitute consultation? It doesn't. It doesn't engage people in a process whereby options are made available and people can write back stating the pros and cons of the various options that they might offer. There is nothing more than NDP propaganda, and the people of Nova Scotia can see, Mr. Speaker, they will be able to see right through it. Here's another question of the postcard. If you would disagree with high insurance rate, please tell us. Mr. Speaker, as somebody has already mentioned in speaking on this bill, here's a piercing glimpse into the obvious. Everyone is going to tell you, yes, Mr. Speaker, our insurance rates are too high. But then what do? I would dare say that the all-party committee that both the government and the NDP vetoed, it would have provided action by now. Not antics like we are seeing from both the government and the opposition parties. What happened to the Premier when he came into office in 1999? He said he didn't mind making tough choices. That's what leadership is all about. He didn't mind making tough choices. That's what leadership is all about. What a difference 4 years makes, and the people of Nova Scotia are paying for this abandonment of this Premier's principles. Mr. Speaker, after our efforts to form a tri-party committee a year ago, this government decides to do something, or at least make it look like they are doing something by introducing a bill and delaying the process until the fall. But we shouldn't be surprised, since this is more inaction by the government's comfortable with inaction. Government seems to be comfortable with inaction, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotians won't be fooled by this government bringing forward a bill, Bill 45, that doesn't address all the issues and won't for some time to come. And Mr. Speaker, that won't help Nova Scotians, since the results will only come well past the election. Mr. Speaker, while there is some merit to the element of Bill 45, this government should recognise that more needs to be done to address the high insurance rates in this province. Mr. Speaker, it should be done today, because much could be done by the government and much could be done by the industry too, Mr. Speaker. Much could be done by the industry, I believe, Mr. Speaker, through fraudulent claims. Mr. Speaker, as we drive in the city through Dartmouth, I noticed a sign on by the highway there offering no deductible on our insurance claims through windshield replacement. Well, Mr. Speaker, when we all buy insurance, there is a deductible that we understand we must pay. But, Mr. Speaker, if somebody is advertising that you don't have to pay it, well, I wonder, Mr. Speaker, who picks up that deductible? Mr. Speaker, that's very obvious who picks it up. It's the insurance company. And the insurance company allows that to go on. If you smash your car or you bang your car, Mr. Speaker, you call in an insurance adjuster. Mr. Speaker, these adjusters, for the most part, are paid by the piecework. The more the cost of the repairs, the more the adjuster gets. Mr. Speaker, is that not been fraudulent? Just a few days ago, Mr. Speaker, I had a call from a fisherman, a small operator. He transports fish for bait for the lobster fishermen. He has a 1-ton truck, a relatively new truck, not probably 6-7 years old, which he used to insure for 4 months of the year or during lobster fishing, so that, and the reason for that being that he trucks fish from Dingwall to Badore, and he does this as a favour to the fishermen so that he can reduce their costs of bait, and in turn they will sell him their lobster. This year, to insure that truck for 4 months will cost him $4,200. And with that, Mr. Speaker, if he cancels that insurance at the end of the season, he must pay 60% of that $4,200 premium to cancel that insurance for the other 8 months. Mr. Speaker, these are conditions that Nova Scotians are facing. These are conditions that people are looking for help with from this government. So, Mr. Speaker, while Bill 45 might help some people to some small measure, but I think, Mr. Speaker, there's a huge gap out there that needs to be filled. There's a hole that must be filled, and consumers in Nova Scotia are expecting their government to act on their behalf to deal with this issue of insurance rates. Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure they're not pinning their hopes on this half measure that this government is providing for them. But what they expect is complete support from this government, not something just to get the government by the next election. As I stated on a couple of occasions before, if we had established an all-party committee 13 months ago or 14 months ago, this issue would have been decided and dealt with, hopefully in the best interest of the consumers in Nova Scotia, and it would have been done before now. Again, Mr. Speaker, the time for inaction must pass. Nova Scotians deserve better from their government. Mr. Speaker, they're expecting better from their government. And Mr. Speaker, I hope by the time the regulations are introduced in the fall setting, that this government will bring some relief to this issue, this troubling issue that's affecting every Nova Scotian one way or another. If it's not through their automobile insurance, it's through their house insurance or any other policy that they may have. Mr. Speaker, I was reading this article in the Halifax Herald on May 7th, and it talks about oil tanks and the responsibility of homeowners to take responsibility of leaking oil tanks. And it goes on to say that, Mr. Speaker, some insurance companies are asked their clients to prove their oil tanks are of a certain quality, or have they been installed by qualified installers, or are they 10 years old or less. And if a homeowner can't provide this information to the benefit or to what the insurance companies want, then that's an excuse for them to cancel their insurance. These are the things that's happening out there, Mr. Speaker. Not only car insurance, but every insurance policy that homeowners have. It goes on to give the costs of new tank installation, Mr. Speaker. They say a 1,000-litre oil tank weighing about 1,000 kilograms when it's full. The purchase price is $250 to $300. The fiberglass tanks cost close to $2,000. Mr. Speaker, these are issues that all homeowners are facing, or every policyholder in Nova Scotia, one way or another. I think it's a vicious attack on insurance companies, and I think people are expecting their government to act on their behalf, to bring relief or bring some common sense to this high cost of insurance premiums in our province, Mr. Speaker. And on that note, I'll take my seat, Mr. Speaker, hoping that Nova Scotians will receive better from this government.
Order, please. The Honourable, yes, I apologize. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to the opportunity over the next few minutes. If the mood strikes me, it could be 59 minutes probably, but because I have lots of important material to bring to your attention and to the House's attention. And, you know, I must begin with the fact that the histrionics that I saw the other night here in late debate. When, you know, Barry Goldwater North, the member from Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, stood in his place and demonstrated an attitude that is as far right as Attila the Hun. But it wasn't necessarily just that member. He was followed by, you know, Senator McCarthy himself. I mean, Uncle Joe would be proud when the conspiracy theory was brought forward. The conspiracy theory that was brought forward in this House at that time, the topic, of course, was the relevance of skyrocketing car insurance. That's an issue, Mr. Speaker. I know that you, as the member for your important riding, I know the member from Cape Breton West, but Mr. Speaker, this is no time for histrionics. It's no time to make excuses about the fact of further delays. Instead, we should be dealing with the issue, Mr. Speaker, and that's what I intend to do. I heard the member from Cape Breton West make reference to this famous document, and I want to go over it now, and I know I'll have to table one of them. But I think it is truly unfair for that member to say that this would be compared to the infamous postcard campaign from the member from Halifax Citadel. That postcard campaign was an unfortunate one. It was divisive. It pitted one part of this province against another part of this province. And this particular document, there's no good reason why Nova Scotians pay for car insurance, pay more for car insurance. But here's the key thing, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to table this, okay? I'm going to table this because the text of my speech is going to be made up of probably the best day that I've ever had as an MLA. I had the chance to respond to over 35 of the people of the 350 that I've received thus far that I had the chance to go over. And the response says, Mr. Speaker, yes, Darrell, I support the NDP task force. But the members of the third party go on at great lengths about these simple questions. I want to bring to the House's attention, and it's going to be of some relevance, Mr. Speaker, and I will take your direction one way or the other. I will take your direction by tabling them as I refer to them, because there is a space on this respondents where you can have the opportunity to make your comments back. And the member from Cape Breton West is always saying that I'm using names in this House because there must become some kind of conspiracy theory about it, that I'm using names in this House and I don't have permission. I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, that the name of every person that I'm going to bring forth today, I have their permission. So try this one out for starts. Harold Carpenter says in his response, "Thank you, Darrell, for standing up for us small people."
Order, please. I've had an opportunity to look at the material that the Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect has requested to table, and I guess it would be permissible and probably required to table these documents at the appropriate time, perhaps at the conclusion of the member's dissertation.
Okay, that would be convenient, and I know the pages have many other important things to do. I know they're going to be paying attention because there are some young people whose quotes I'm going to be using, some comments I'm going to be using, and I'm quite prepared at the end to table these reports. Mr. Carpenter's comment is the first one. I want to try out some comments that I know will be of real significance to members opposite. You know, you want to have a good day, Mr. Speaker. You have the opportunity to respond because these people have sent us a message. They've left their telephone numbers. They've left their emails. And when you call them back, you want to have a good day as an MLA. It's a wonderful opportunity to hear from Nova Scotians. And I want to thank in particular Basil Martin, who lives at 663 Brookside Road. I called Mr. Martin. I thanked him for the time that he took to respond to this survey, this chance for the MLAs from this particular party, and now all MLAs to look at these comments. Mr. Martin writes, "Bill, keep up the good work for the people of Timberley Prospect." 74 years of age, Basil Martin has made a compliment that I will take, one that I've made a copy of that I have at my desk in my constituency office at the BLT Centre in Timberley. Try this one. "Keep it up, Daryl. Your voice is getting heard." And I want to thank those sorts of people for motivating me to be able to stand in my place and share with the House today the response of Nova Scotians on a mail-out that was sent out so that MLAs from this caucus, the NDP caucus, would have an opportunity to listen to what Nova Scotians actually have to say. And are the members of the third party interested in this? They certainly would have the opportunity, because it's their conspiracy theory by Senator McCarthy himself, the MLA from Cape Breton West, who stands in his place and always finds some reason why the NDP. He stood in at that time and he mentioned, of all things, the Regina Manifesto of 1933, waved it around, quoted from it. But you know, this is the same country that has socialized medicine. This is the same country that has a social welfare system based upon the fact that I know the member from Cape Breton West and I know the member from Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley. They say the socialists are at the door. Well, I've got a message for those members. The socialists are sitting in this legislature. Today, the New Democratic Party and the socialist member from Timberley Prospect is standing in his place and saying that I'm listening to Nova Scotians, unlike the members of the third party, unlike the members from the government. I hope they listen to this comment. You want a compliment as a political leader in this province? You try this one out. Rock on, Daryl. Keep up the good work. Now, let's have a look at some of the more important, specific examples of people from my constituency of Timberley Prospect who have concerns about these skyrocketing insurance. You want to have a good day, Mr. Speaker. I encourage you to have a mail-out like this on a topic as important as this, and then take the time during the evening to call these people back. These people appreciate the fact that at least some political party in this province is listening to them, and at least some political party is standing in their place and having their say on their behalf. Margie Bishop of 22 Richard Street says, "Our rates are ridiculous."
Comments by saying that the Nova Scotians he is referencing here had given him permission to use those names in the legislature. It's not necessary, but I was a bit preoccupied when the honourable member started his dissertation on Bill number 45, and just for greater clarity, perhaps the honourable member could tell the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will clarify that again, that I know that there are certain members of the third party who have accused me of standing in my place, and in the past have said that I've used names, mainly the names of ex-students who are current residents of Timberley Prospect. Mr. Speaker, I have the permission of the people whose names I'm bringing forth today. Margie Bishop is the past secretary of Sir John A. Macdonald High School. Margie Bishop has said our rates are ridiculous. She lives on Richard Street in Timberley. J.G. Vino of Foxbury Lane in Hatchet Lake says, he wrote to me, "1 whole month's income goes to auto insurance now. Will I have to sell my home to drive?" I called Mrs. Vino and had a conversation with her on this topic. This is, after all, an example of some of the frustrations of people who live in the constituency of Timberley Prospect that are not serviced by Metro Transit. There is no Metro Transit on the Prospect Road, and that people, to and from work, to and from the groceries, to and from the bank, to and from university, they must use a vehicle. They must use a vehicle. The best example that I can use, Mr. Speaker, and he was here in our gallery today, is, of course, Tony Roding. And I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, that Tony Roding was, and you will see him this evening, I assume, on the local news. Tony Roding was a student of mine, and he's grown since then, let me tell you. Tony Roding is 20 years of age. Tony has said there's no protection from insurance companies. It's getting out of hand, and no one is doing anything about it, especially this government. He's been driving since he is 16. He has no accidents. However, he needs that vehicle to get to and from his place of work and, of course, his studies at university. Now, how is Tony Roding going to handle skyrocketing insurance? How is he going to handle tuitions that continue to grow? I hope tonight that members opposite and the members of the third party catch the 6 o'clock news, because they will see pictures of the vehicle that Tony Roding drives. And it is absolutely inexcusable that Mr. Roding would have to have the sort of insurance that he has to have as a 20-year-old trying to hold down a job, further in education, and after all, make a future for himself. I want also to bring up the name of J.K. Glazer. Now, Mr. Glazer lives at 4050 Prospect Road in Shad Bay. And this is what Mr. Glazer says to me, and he repeated it when I talked to him. He has had his insurance rates go from $781 to $1,823. My renewal premium doubled. Why, he asked. I had no claims. I had no violations. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are people who live in the more rural parts of Timberley Prospect who recently have had their postal code changed. They had their postal code changed, and it's important that members understand why this has happened. Because of the growth in the community, there are so many people who have been using the Lakeside Post Office that they have had to build a new and expanded post office in Tantallon. And because of that, because of the growth in the community of Timberley, Beachville, Lakeside, and Timberley, and towards the head of St. Margaret's Bay, this new post office took on these new postal codes coming out of the Tantallon Post Office. So no longer did the Tantallon Post Office have BOJ as its postal code. Now they had B3Z. B3Z. So these people who live through Bayside and Dover, who live up the Peggy's Cove Road, and I know the member from Chester St. Margaret's has heard from these residents, these people had a postal code change. And because of their postal code change, their car insurance rates jumped. Their houses didn't move. They didn't change their driving habits. Most of these people had no accidents and no claims, but their postal codes changed. Because of that, their insurance rate jumps. Now, is that a reasonable way to have your insurance rate doubled? Absolutely inexcusable. Inexcusable. And the insurance companies, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. We've decided we're going to change it. The postal code, B3Z, I guess means that they are within the urban core, as opposed to living in Bayside or Shad Bay. Shad Bay, Bayside, Terrence Bay, Lower Prospect are still rural Nova Scotia. Those houses haven't moved, yet the insurance rates of these unfortunate Nova Scotians has jumped inexplicably. But I want to use the example of a neighbor of mine. And yes, Mr. Speaker, I have permission, of course, to use this neighbor, because I want you to know that on June the 19th, I'm going to have the wonderful opportunity to go to the 60th anniversary of Elsie and Alan McNeil. 60 years together. And Elsie lives at 4742 St. Margaret's Bay Road, Upper Tantallon. And I want you to know, Ms. McNeil has a concern, because as Elsie wrote to me, and I followed up with a phone call, I am accident-free. I have a 2001 Toyota. My insurance rate has jumped by 38%. 38%. A senior in our community who has for so many years been involved in volunteer activities, in so many years has been a model citizen in our community, who for so many years has been one of the biggest supporters of the St. Margaret's Bay Lions Club, a wonderful citizen of the community of Upper Tantallon. Now she has to pay, as her husband has to pay, this sort of increased insurance rate. Well, I had to eventually visit and get somehow over the rotten roads on the way to Terrence Bay. And I went down over Porcupine Hill, where I had the chance to visit the Vaders family at 1060 Terrence Bay Road. And this is what Yvonne Vaders wrote. And when I called her, she said, "You tell them exactly what I said, Bill." Because she wrote, "Insurance is a ripoff, especially with seniors and with young people." Now, Miss Vaders is upset. Miss Vaders of the Terrence Bay Road location that I mentioned earlier is upset. There's no Metro Transit in Terrence Bay. There is no way for Miss Vaders and her family to make their way to and from their places of work in metropolitan Halifax, Dartmouth. There is no other way for them to get to the bank, for them to go to the local bingo, for them to attend any kind of personal business. They have to drive. They have to drive, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotians are frustrated. They are upset. And Yvonne Vaders is a perfect example.
Somebody say bingo?
Now let's talk, and I know that members opposite often say, as do members from the third party, that I refer to too many past students. Too many of my past students are used in speeches in this House. Well, that's why I guess they call the MLA, because they want something that I can bring up, something that they want addressed. And I want to bring up the example of Robert Butler. Now, Robert Butler had been insured for $700. He owns a 91 van. Robert's under 25. Robert is this citizen who had a van that needed a paint job. So he repainted it. In fact, he painted it with tiger stripes. Now, Mr. Speaker, maybe you saw this issue on the news. Now, when Mr. Butler goes to have his insurance renewed, he's told he has a customized van. Robert did the paint job. He has a customized tiger stripe van because it has tiger stripes on it that he painted on it, which makes it customized. Now, is that the sort of reason he's been phoning companies, and the best offer that he was offered was $1,900, from $700 to $1,900. Now, Robert's question for his old teacher, with emphasis on the adjective old, Robert's question for his old teacher is that fair? Is that fair? Is that how Nova Scotians can be expected to be treated by insurance companies in this province? That certainly is not fair, Robert, and that's one of the reasons that I appreciate the opportunity to bring up his example again in this House today. Now, perhaps you've heard this example too, Mr. Speaker, and yes, I've had the opportunity to speak to Christine Poirier. Christine Poirier lives on Elm Grove Avenue in Parkdale in Timberley. Now, Christine has a 20-year-old son who continues to live with her. He wants to get a driver's license. She had one vehicle that was broken down, and she brought another used one. Now, her 20-year-old son wants to go out and get his license, his full license. However, the insurance company informs Ms. Poirier that he will be listed as the primary driver on both vehicles, even though he will not be. Ms. Poirier has a clean driving record, she's living on a fixed income, and she's been told to expect that her insurance rates will increase from $1,300 to over $3,000. Now that example is important again, And I hope that members opposite know that these are only examples that this MLA has heard back from on this survey that was sent out. I want the members of the third party to know this is no postcard. This does not divide Nova Scotians. This is not in any way pitting one part of Nova Scotia against another. This is an opportunity for Nova Scotians to have their say to their MLA on this issue. And the members of the third party can make light of the questions where you check off yes or no. But I hope they've been listening to what I've been reading into the record, because, Mr. Speaker, as you know earlier, I will be tabling all of these comments. It says comments here. Comments. Those are, after all, the important response that I've heard from the people in my constituency. Those comments are important. This is no divisive postcard. This is, after all, containing important information that Nova Scotians have to know about. That to ensure this particular vehicle, it is in Winnipeg, $1,164. In Saskatoon, it's $1,263. In Vancouver, it's $1,630. In Calgary, it's $2,311. In St. John, it's $2,423. And in Halifax, it's $2,574. Mr. Speaker, those are statistics which we can confirm in this caucus. This is not a postcard. This is an informational piece of relevant information that Nova Scotians want to hear about. And I want the member from Cumberland South to listen to this particular, and I will table this document too, Mr. Speaker, that included in this particular piece of important information where car insurance has increased 65% in Nova Scotia. We have the comment from the editor of the Amherst Daily News, March 6th, 2003. And it's important that the editor of the Amherst Daily News gets this on the record, because it's contained in this particular piece of information that went out to Nova Scotians. Once again, the editor writes, Nova Scotia's New Democratic Party is giving the governing Tories and the floundering Liberals a lesson in basic politics. And they're doing it by example. Now Dexter and the New Democrats have won up the Tories and Grits once again, this time over the issue of rapidly rising automobile insurance rates. Mr. Speaker, that's not the MLA from Timberley Prospect endorsing the leader. That's not the MLA from Timberley Prospect endorsing this particular piece of insurance campaign. That's the editor of the Amherst Daily News. That he says it quite right. The governing Tories and the floundering Liberals and their leader, who we seldom so see these days, the floundering Liberals and the governing Tories, it's time that they really, truly listen to Nova Scotians. That they truly listen to Nova Scotians. And that's, after all, what I'm about today, continuing to bring examples that have been mailed back to me, Mr. Speaker, that I'm going to table here in the House so that members can see for themselves some of the comments of the people that I've been fortunate enough to contact. I want to proceed, if I can, Mr. Speaker, to talk about the Rice family. They live at 30 Rains Mill Road in Lakeside. And yes, I had the opportunity to talk to David. I pay more for insurance than what my car is worth, and students can't afford that. Now here's David, living on 30 Rains Mill Road, living in Lakeside, coming to and from the community of Clayton Park, I believe, where he has a part-time job. How is David to get to that job, Mr. Speaker? He uses his vehicle. He uses his vehicle because he is, after all, one of those people dependent upon his own set of wheels so he can go to and from his place of work. And now he is paying more for insurance than his car is worth, Mr. Speaker. I want to, if I may, turn to Bob Lusby. Thank you, sir, for correcting my pronunciation on that. It is a disgrace to our democratic country that a truly elected government is so selfishly irresponsible to the people who elected them. Try that on for size, Mr. Speaker. It is a disgrace to our democratic, and in brackets he writes SIC, which is a Latin term referring to the fact maybe he's questioning democratic country, that its duly elected government is so selfishly irresponsible to the people who elected them. Now, if that sounds like a happy voter, I will guarantee you that whoever runs in Timberley Prospect for the members of that party, and whoever takes the challenge to run for the third party, I would like to have the opportunity to go to the doorstep at the same time and talk to this resident who has a concern, after all, about an issue that has not been addressed by that government, and has not under any circumstances ever had the opportunity to speak to the MLA other than myself. Now let's try Josh Elner out. He's 17 years of age. Josh lives at 5 Clare Court in the community of Timberley.
You know, that's why the Liberals are down.
You know, I want you to know that Josh works at the Micmac Mall. He works at the Micmac Mall, Mr. Speaker. Now, how does Josh get from his home in Timberley Village? This is what Josh wrote to his MLA, and I had the opportunity and the pleasure to talk to him. Rates are outrageous. I and my brother cannot continue to pay these rates. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, Josh is frustrated. Josh is upset. Josh wants to have the opportunity to make himself a good living. He wants to have the opportunity to get an education. He wants to have the opportunity to make sure that he can get to and from his place of work in a safe vehicle that is insured. Now, here's the problem, and I'm coming to it because of the fact that I'm going to refer to another constituent that I had a conversation with, and he lives in the Maple Streets in Timberley. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know I was a history teacher, but there is a subdivision in my community where all the streets are named Maple. There is Mountain Maple, Tiger Maple, Silver Maple, Sugar Maple. And I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, that if you want to see someone who, when he gets canvassing, especially when it's coming down to dark, has had the embarrassing moment of having his cell phone called a number of times because the other canvassers can't find me because I don't know what street I'm on. However, I want you to know that on 47 Mountain Maple, a Maple Street that I did not mention before, Wayne Cummings wrote to me, and I called Wayne back. Wayne reinforces the fact, this is what Mr. Cummings says: if something doesn't change, it will force us to drive without insurance. If something doesn't change, it will force us to drive without insurance. Now, my good friend from Cape Breton Centre, numerous times in this House, has brought up the statistic. He's brought up the fact that there have been a 48% increase in charges of people driving without insurance in this province. 2,700 Nova Scotians have been charged for driving without insurance. And the reason, I would assume, Mr. Speaker, the huge number of people who are driving without insurance is because they cannot afford it. They cannot afford it. What other kind of testament do we have to have when it comes an issue of this importance? They can't afford it. Wayne says it quite correctly. Wayne says it quite correctly. If something doesn't change, it'll force us to drive without insurance. Mr. Cummings still has insurance. I want you to be clear on that, Mr. Speaker. Wayne still has insurance, but the inevitable decision is going to be made. Will he and other Nova Scotians have to become criminals? Will they have to become criminals because they cannot pay the outrageous insurance rates? Is that what we're coming to, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the fact that Nova Scotians can't pay insurance rates? They're going to make the decision, we won't have insurance. We'll drive without them. And I want you to be assured, Nova Scotians such as Wayne Cummings of 47 Mountain Maple Drive in Timberley. They don't want to do that. They want to be law-abiding citizens, but they want to feel that their government is going to take care of their best interest, that their government is going to listen to them. So those people in my community, and the community from Dartmouth North, and the community from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, and the community from Dartmouth Cole Harbour or Lower Sackville, they have relished the opportunity to respond. Our office is overwhelmed with the number of people who have responded to this survey. Mr. Speaker, this is no divisive postcard. This is no divisive postcard which is pitting one Nova Scotian against another Nova Scotian. And how dare the members of the Liberal Party say that that divisive postcard and this informative piece of information can be treated the same way. That is shameful, Mr. Speaker. That is absolutely inexcusable, because those Liberals haven't been listening to Nova Scotians. Those Liberals have not been doing what they should be doing when it comes to the residences in their community. It would be opportune for them to go through the phone book, to go through and have a look and call some numbers, call some people, go to the local Tim Hortons there tomorrow morning and say, so what do you think of car insurance? What's car insurance doing for you? Just take a little survey in your own Tim Hortons. Nova Scotians are talking about it, Mr. Speaker. They are talking about it, and in the coffee shops in Timberley Prospect, they're talking about this survey. They're talking about the opportunity that they can respond, that they are being listened to. And the few ones that I've been able to be in contact with, and I had 4 hours to make these calls, and I know that many people who are probably listening or watching at home are going to say, I responded, Bill, I made a comment, you never called me. I couldn't get to them all, Mr. Speaker. But I want you to know something, Mr. Speaker. I want you to know something, that I have sent a personal thank you card to everyone that I have received thus far. That, after all, says that somebody is listening to Nova Scotians. And the comments that are directed to the leader of the NDP, the comments that he's hearing, well, let's just try a couple of them out for size. I think you should know, Mr. Speaker, that we might have the attention of the Liberal Party of this province for a change, because if you read the Sunday Daily News, you had the opportunity, and I will table this in a moment, you had the opportunity to read what David Rodenizer says. If Ham, Russell give good news this week on insurance, it's Dexter we have to thank for it. It's Dexter we have to thank for it. That, after all, says it. Here is a columnist, a reporter that worked in this House for a number of years, a legislative reporter. David Rodenizer says it best. It's Dexter we have to thank. Whether it is that Halifax Daily, whether it is the Amherst newspapers, they are saying it like it is. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, individual Nova Scotians, individual residents of my constituency are taking the opportunity to have their say. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out, if I may, the comment from Martin Fraser of 129 Governor's Lake Drive. And this is exactly what Martin says. Martin said, if the limited transit use in our area, oh, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, I read incorrectly. With the limited transit use in our community, it is impossible to get to and from our place of work. It is hard to pay. It is hard to stay on the road with these insurance rates. And I apologize to Martin. As Martin probably knows, the printing is small and the eyesight is weak. Let me lay this one, if I may, and I will be laying them all here on the table for members opposite. I look forward to reading them. I look forward to seeing them sitting in their place, to taking them from the clerk and reading them. Let's try what Pat O'Toole says of 1404 St. Margaret's Bay Road. Trying to live on a fixed income, I might have to stop driving due to insurance. I might have to stop driving. So Mr. O'Toole is saying he doesn't want to break the law, but he also is aware of the fact that there are major concerns when it comes to the skyrocketing insurance that he has to face. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've heard members opposite say that under no circumstances do they want civil servants to run the insurance system in this province. Mr. Speaker, that closed-mindedness, without the opportunity to look at the situation in Manitoba, and there's no, we're not in the situation of making glib comments about Manitoba and how flat the roads are. Without looking at the Manitoba situation, without looking at the situation in British Columbia, without considering what has been done in Saskatchewan, I mean, we do not have all the answers in this province, Mr. Speaker. And I think we only have to turn to the example of the socialized medicine system that began in Saskatchewan. And I know that members of the third party can refer to the Regina Manifesto of '33, and perhaps I should have mailed that out, because after all, they rely on that document. I don't know whether we're going to go back to such nonsense in the revision of history. But I think it's of real consequence that we understand that the Saskatchewan example, the CCF and the NDP example, when it came, after all, down to socialized medicine, was a valuable one. It was a valuable one. It was so valuable that, of course, the great borrowers of ideas, and all you have to do, Mr. Speaker, is look at the history of this country. The great party of the middle, they have no qualms about taking ideas from this group or that group and then using them as a way to get elected. Medicare operates across this country. Socialized medicine operates across this country, and maybe the member from Cape Breton West could stand in his place and do his McCarthy imitation again. Maybe he could stand and make comments about pinkos and commies and leftists and socialists, because that's, after all, the very sort of nonsense that does nothing when we're having a debate on important issues such as insurance rates. I say that there's an example to be followed in other provinces. I don't know all the answers, Mr. Speaker, on this particular question, but I'm willing to listen to Nova Scotians. I'm willing to listen to my friend from Cape Breton Centre, my friend from Halifax Chebucto, my friend from Halifax Fairview, who have been on this task force, who have been listening to Nova Scotians from one end of this province to another, who met at St. Mary's University with students and listened to the students with their particular concerns. And Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that a number of the students that I had in school were at that meeting. And it's proud to see that they stand and have their say when it comes to this issue.
Order, please. The Honourable, the member for Cape Breton West, by his gesture, would like to know if the member for Timberley Prospect would take a question.
At this time, Mr. Speaker, I have far more of the comments to make, and I'll have to entertain the question at another time.
The member for Timberley Prospect has the floor.
And just for the information of the page, I know the pages have heard me say a number of times that I have various comments to table, and I'm going to table them all at the end. That was the agreement that we had with the Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to stand in my place and continue to bring these examples to your attention. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know that when it comes to the fact that we are talking about an important issue here, Nova Scotians and this particular MLA, we don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. But I want you to know yesterday I was very fortunate that an old friend was visiting from Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Ken Sherwin was here on a convention, a national convention. Mr. Sherwin was the principal of Yorkton Regional High School. He currently is retired and he serves on one of the credit unions in Saskatchewan. And there was a convention here of credit unions across the province. And Ken, in the middle of his busy schedule, gave me a call. I, of course, knew Mr. Sherwin when we were both volleyball coaches, and I had the chance to visit Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Now, was that a coincidence that when I was the vice principal and volleyball coach at Sackville High School that we went to Yorkton, Saskatchewan? I know the member from Sackville Beaverbank could probably get a quick history lesson. They used to call it the Red Triangle, because at one time in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, heaven forbid the member from Cape Breton West is aware of these facts, that they actually elected a communist, a member of that particular party, to their legislature. We went to Yorkton just as a coincidence. It was at that time I met Lauren Nystrom for the first time. It was at that time that I met Roy Romano at that time. And it was at that time that a young man by the name of Neil McKay. Neil McKay is the son and a great young man and a fine young volleyball player clear he was. The captain of the team that year. Neil McKay, of course, is the son of a previous member of this government on that particular stripe. And Neil had the opportunity to meet Lord Nystrom. We had the opportunity to meet Roy Romanow. And let me tell you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Is the honourable member for Cape Breton West on a point of
order.
On a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we've heard the honourable member in his dissertation expound on the virtues of this publicly run insurance program that they're advocating, but yet at no point in time did they ever deal with the issue of contingency fees. And I'm just wondering if, in fact, there's a bit of a dichotomy on what they're proposing here. On one hand, it's capitalism. On the other hand, it's socialism. Which is it?
Order, please. That intervention, while it doesn't meet the terms and condition of a point of order, it does, I guess, pose a question to the honourable member for Timberley Prospect. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect has the floor.
Who posed the
Mr. Speaker, I know exactly where I was with the Yorkton and Neil McKay, and I'll come back to the member for Sackville Beaverbank for this. Thank you. I want you to know that those sorts of asides are the ones that are the famous rabbit tracks that I will not entertain. But I would offer to the member opposite a wonderful document that perhaps we can get from the library, the history of isms in Canada, the history of isms. Isms. And you know, in those ISMS, okay? And I don't have the author, at hand, but I want you to know that in the middle of socialism and communism, I would like to introduce the member to fatalism. And it's fatal that when he gets involved in a discussion of this nature, he shows that this is not what we're talking about in this issue. I'm talking about an important issue for Nova Scotians. I'm talking about insurance rates and the fact that this government has been doing nothing. Now, Mr. Speaker, the issue is this.
Please, order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton West on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, what we're witnessing here is a total misunderstanding and lack of understanding of all the factors that contribute to the escalating insurance rates. If he's not prepared to discuss one of the contributing factors, that being contingency rates, then obviously he's misunderstood the entire issue.
Order, please. Order, please. I think I would have to suggest to all honourable members that over the course of the last few days we've had lots of interventions, and seldom can I remember that an actual point of order was made on the intervention. And perhaps it would be appropriate to read a short couple of sentences out of the Parliamentary Rules and Forms, Beauchesne, 6th edition, Fraser, Dawson, and Holtby. And this is for all honourable members. It has been formally ruled by speakers that statements by members respecting themselves, and particularly within their own knowledge, must be accepted. It is not unparliamentary temperately to criticize statements made by members as being contrary to the facts, but no imputation of intentional falsehood is permissible. On rare occasions, I would say on more than rare occasions, this may result in the House having to accept two contradictory accounts of the same incident. So I think this is clearly what we have here. We have an occasion that has resulted in the House having to accept two contradictory accounts of the same incident. And I would caution all members that the member for Timberley Prospect does have the floor, and he is speaking on, as he knows, I'm sure, Bill number 45, the Insurance Act.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I plan to continue to introduce a few more of the comments from the people of Timberley Prospect. And I want you to know that when it comes to insurance, we have all much to learn. And I know that when Ken Sherwin placed that call to me last evening, it was with interest that he brought up the fact, of course, because he had picked up the press here when he was, or he's still in the city, he's flying out tonight. He picked up the paper. He, of course, wanted to know, so how goes it with the insurance issue? Now, I want you to know that I stayed in Ken Sherwin's home as the volleyball coach at Yorkton Regional High School, and not at one time did we discuss politics. This was back in the early 80s, Mr. Speaker. Politics was not the topic. I'm not sure how Ken and Merrill Sherwin vote. That's not the issue here. At this particular point in time, I'm not even sure if the MLA from Yorkton is a member of the NDP or not. I hope he is. I hope she is. But this is what Ken Sherwin's take is on it. Ken Sherwin said to me, well, Bill, I hope that you're taking a good look at the Saskatchewan example when it comes to insurance rates. Now, this comes from a friend that I've exchanged Christmas cards with, that I have seen once in the last 15 years. He lives in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. It's an opportunity for us to exchange for a few minutes and how are things going. And inevitably, it comes around to the fact, I hope, that Nova Scotia is looking at Saskatchewan's example. He's not saying we have to take it holus bolus. He's not saying that they have all the answers, but he is saying, and he did bring it to my attention during the comments, I hope you know that Saskatoon, Saskatchewan has insurance rates for $12.63 on the same vehicle that we are paying in Halifax, $2,574. Those are cold, hard facts. But perhaps some member from Cape Breton West might be interested to hear from these constituents. Who writes? Glenn Moore writes in the response, another response that I've had the opportunity to speak to. We should look at running our own provincially owned insurance plan. Glenn Moore. Stephen O'Rourke, 318 Charles Road. The government must regulate. Now there's an example, two more, of Nova Scotians that have participated in this very worthwhile exchange that members opposite and members of the third party have given such a rough time to. It baffles me why the members of the government or the members of the third party wouldn't want to hear from Nova Scotians. It has given me some of the best moments that I've had as the MLA from Timberlea Prospect. These wonderful little responses that were mailed back to the NDP caucus office have kept Catherine Chambers, our receptionist, busy as she sorts them by constituency, as she makes them available to us as MLAs. And I want members opposite to know, and members of the third party to know, we've also got them from members of your constituencies. And we are going to respond to them. We are going to send them thank you notes. We're going to give them a call. And when the opportunity comes, we're going to use the examples. We're going to use the examples of Nova Scotians who've taken the time, Mr. Speaker, to write their comments. So if you want your day made, you send out a survey such as this. And I want to try these ones on you because these two have certainly made my day when I placed these calls over the last couple of evenings. Carl Rafuse of 204 Sandy Cove Road in Terrence Bay wrote to me, his MLA, "Keep up the good work, Bill. Thanks." Mr. Harry of 3254 Prospect Road in Whites Lake, "Please continue to work for the people. Thanks."
Is that Bob Harry?
Now, is that not, after all, why we are in this place? Are we in this place to listen to Nova Scotians and to bring forth issues that Nova Scotians consider of some import? The answer, of course, is yes. The answer is not to take cheap shots. The answer is not to wave around the Regina Manifesto of 1933. The issue is not to make sure that we're going to go out and play politics with an issue like this. This issue was mailed to the homes of the people that I represent because I wanted to hear from Nova Scotians. I wanted to hear from them. And I've had the opportunity to hear from them. And I'm going to continue to hear from them. I'm going to continue to hear from them because this, Mr. Speaker, is conversation in the hockey dressing room.
With the order, please, would the member permit an introduction?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I couldn't read your lips. Certainly, thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Dartmouth South.
Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for yielding the floor. And I thank the honourable member over there also. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you and other members of the House a distinguished member of the Dartmouth community and the president of my constituency association, Mr. Barry O'Keefe, who is up in the East Gallery, and I'd like to have all members of the House wish him a warm welcome.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to our guest as introduced, and welcome to all our guests in the gallery, including an MLA from one of the caucuses, the Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, and I welcome our guests here. And perhaps that president of that local association could use the example which we've been using in Timberley Prospect. Because I want you to know that the president of the association that I'm fortunate enough to represent has said to me, and he was in my office for a moment this morning as I was gathering up my things to come here, I want you to know that Chef Rene, and I'll call him that because his last name is too long, and I know the Hansards always gets upset when I use this Dutch gentleman's name. His name is Chef Rene van Nieuwenhuizen. Chef Rene was the chef at Mount Allison University. He's the president of the Timberley Prospect and NDP Association. He has said that on his street, on Charles Street in Timberley, people are talking about the mail-out from the NDP. People are talking about the fact that in the communities of Timberley, the communities of Terrence Bay or Prospect, the communities of Hammonds Plains, the communities of Halliburton Hills, that the MLA wants to know what they think about insurance rates. That's why the response has been such it is. That's, after all, an issue and an example that I would hope that the member from Dartmouth South would take with him, that this is an exercise of real importance of listening to Nova Scotians. And why has this happened, Mr. Speaker? Has this happened on the eve of the election because someone through conspiratorial moves has decided this is the hot button issue, we're going to make it the hot button issue, this will take us over the hump, we are going to use this for election purposes? Mr. Speaker, this party, this caucus, has no idea when the Premier of this province will finally have the courage to call an election. That's not within our purview. That's not the issue that we are talking about. The timing...
Order, please. Honourable members, there's far too much discussion taking place in the chamber. I'd ask members to please try and turn it down a bit. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect has approximately 8 minutes or so left.
Well, 8 minutes goes so quickly. I think I've got to make this very clear, that when it came to the insurance issues and when they surfaced, and I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, that a number of the people, particularly the young man with the striped van, he was one of the first people that called me. And I remember taking it to the caucus table and saying, with all the things that are going on at the URB, with some of the things that we are dealing with in this caucus as we prepare for this spring session of the legislature, we have to have the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to listen to Nova Scotians. Not that it was my idea. That's not the point, Mr. Speaker. It's not my idea or this caucus's idea. The opportunity was there through this piece of information, to send this piece of information out so that Nova Scotians would see what, after all, the facts are when it comes to insurance rates across this country. That's the comparative tone which we wanted in this piece of literature. It isn't that we've been sitting and waiting and holding this back on the eve, or what we hear is on the eve of an election. That's not the issue here. This is an issue for Nova Scotians that has to be dealt with. The timing is, after all, not what is involved when it comes to a particular election issue. Yes, on the doorsteps, because of this half-hearted, we're going to freeze it to January approach, there are going to be many Nova Scotians. I thought my friend from Dartmouth North was going to speak and ask for some order and to try and get that door closed, but it's beyond my example to do that.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect has approximately less than 6 minutes left in his dissertation at this time.
And you know, the next 6 minutes are important. And I hope the member from Preston will take his seat and listen for a change, because it would seem to me that this is an example, and I have some required reading here from members opposite. members opposite who could learn from these, and I'll be tabling them in just a moment for the page that has waited so patiently as I've referred to all of these. And I thank you for your patience. However, here's the example that Nova Scotians want us as elected officials to follow. That we listen to them, that we consider their opinions, and that when they are in contact with us on an issue of this importance, we actually are going to do something about it. We are going to bring in legislation that will address this issue, that will make sure that Nova Scotians pay a fair insurance rate wherever they live, whatever their postal code is, whatever their age is, based upon their driving record. And for that Minister of Environment and Labor, to hold the ball, to go into the stall routine of a basketball team that's got a 2-point lead and trying to eke out a victory, that is crass politics at its worst. Crass politics at its worst. And it will backfire. Because people are saying, as we've heard, as my friend from Halifax Needham has heard, as my friend from Dartmouth North has heard, we've heard from Nova Scotians that this freeze isn't going to work. And that Bill 45 is not going to do the job.
It's not a freeze.
It's not going to work because of the exceptions that are going to continue. It's not going to solve the issue. The issue, after all, has been looked at in other jurisdictions. It has been looked at in Saskatchewan. And yes, Saskatchewan currently has an NDP government. And it's been looked at in Manitoba, and Manitoba currently has an NDP government. But the point is, can we not learn from the examples of other provinces? Cannot we look at the examples from other provinces, Mr. Speaker? Do we have all the answers here? Of course we don't have all the answers here. And it's real important that we look at other examples that would serve us well when it comes to addressing this issue. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know that as an elected official, and you know as an elected official, our number one job is to listen to our constituents. And when they call us or when they write us, to get back to them. To get back to them either by email, or my preference is to knock on their door on a Saturday afternoon and say, you called. I was in the community. I thought I could find out what you're talking about. Well, I want you to know this Saturday, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take that opportunity again. Because Saturday's what I do, because Timberley's the very suburban part of the community. I go down the Prospect Road and I make my stops. And I want you to know that when I sit in the Government Wharf in Terrence Bay, or when I sit in the Government Wharf in Lower Prospect on this Saturday afternoon, and I hear the Blackburns, or I hear Reg Knight, or I hear Derek Sloan-White, you know what they're going to be talking about? They're not going to be for a change, giving it to me about my Boston Bruins. They're going to be talking about insurance rates. They're going to be talking about the fact that they've had the opportunity to have their say. They've had the opportunity to make sure they've been listened to. And it's those Nova Scotians that I am proud to say that I've been able to stand in this place to bring their individual cases to your attention, to be able now to table these so that members opposite can look at them and say, thankfully, Nova Scotians are being listened to. Those, after all, are just 33 of the Nova Scotians that I had the opportunity to speak to. And I hope that members opposite, and I hope the members of the third party, when they have their opportunity, don't get up and make cheap political comments. Don't get into the theatrics of doing their Barry Goldwater imitations, or for one reason or another letting on that there's Senator McCarthy revisited and that they have the latest conspiracy theory which is going to bring the government down. That you don't take shots at the Regina Manifesto. They don't take shots at the socialist tradition. They look at the example that of other provinces that when it comes to insurance, we have something to learn, something that Nova Scotians want to be listened to. And I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, that during the recent number of minutes, I've had that opportunity to bring those examples to your attention. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to Bill number 45, an act to amend Chapter 231 of the Revised Statutes, 1989, the Insurance Act. Speaker, I've just received advice from the previous speaker as to how to conduct myself, and that I should not attack or look for conspiracy theories or whatever with government, but and I shan't do that. I shall follow the directions of my learned colleague. My theory that I operate under so far, and has stood me in good stead over the years, is just as far as the Tories and the NDP go, just leave them alone. They'll take care of themselves, really. And I think how they both have acted on this Insurance Act would demonstrate that very clearly, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of misinformation floating around, but certainly there's a lack of leadership on the part of the government, and certainly there's a lack of a clear position being stated by the NDP. You know, are they in favor of full government insurance? I mean, they have not said that, but they're allowing people to believe they're trying to be all things to all people. So, but I will take the direction of my learned colleague and will speak about our position and how I see this legislation that's before us here today. But there's certainly a lack of clarity on position and direction, and certainly that of leadership. So, Mr. Speaker, essentially the bill that's before us, as the explanatory notes highlight throughout adjacent to the clauses of this bill, there should be no change in the rates or rules, and may be effective until January the 1st, 2004. And on the surface, it's always amazing to me how, when you first look at legislation, how clear it is and how it seems to be in the right direction. You can certainly agree with it. And certainly something has to be done on the rates of insurance, all insurance. Automobile insurance gets a lot of attention, but I speak to people that spoke to a woman outside my constituency office the other Monday morning, and she said she had been without insurance on her house for 4 months. I didn't bring all my stories that I've heard, but certainly there's a few that we shared last evening, Mr. Speaker, as you know, at the IBAN's dinner, and I thought that was a very good exchange. All parties were there represented, and we had members in the industry we had their attention and we had their advice, and informally later I found that they were very forthright and open, and it was a good way, and I wish there was more of that going on, because we have taken an initiative in our caucus. We at one juncture we had representatives of the industry, Mr. Ferjean and some colleagues, and to meet at the same time that we had the lawyers that pursue the litigation matters relative particularly to soft tissue injuries, but not only soft tissue injuries, but to other matters. And there can be a consensus on certain issues and a clarification. But the whole reason on the car insurance rates, that has gained a great deal of attention because of the dramatic increase that has taken place. And there are many examples that all MLAs have learned of that. But looking at the explanatory notes further, Mr. Speaker, and interpretation of what is before us here, it again authorized the Governor and Council to make regulations, prescribe regulations for which an automobile insurer cannot refuse to issue, to refuse to renew, or to terminate insurance, or refuse to provide or continue any coverage or endorsement. Mr. Speaker, that again seems very clear and forthright and would be appropriate to be there. But yet we hear concerns raised in the legislature here today that in fact there are some companies that will not be adhering to this, and I'm sure they have had legal advice and sought those matters to be appropriate, any actions on their part to be appropriate, but so we'll have to follow. So my point being that, and first surface, when you look at legislation such as this, it looks like just what was ordered, and at least for the time being, it's a bit of freeze. It's not a solution, and neither is it a long-term effect, but at least for those that would be renewing their policies, and it would prevent increases at that time on the surface. And how the legislation, in fact, plays out and actually works is the real telling of how good a legislation it is, and that other matters cannot override these amendments. Our legislation, Bill 45, goes on, Mr. Speaker, to speak in terms of penalty, and also the fact is the retroactive date to May the 1st. So that's essentially, it's a very simple piece of legislation, and it's certainly a bit of a very small measure on a very large and a matter that's affected all Nova Scotians. There's a pattern that's evolving with this government, Mr. Speaker, on these matters. And I want to comment a little more later on that, but there's matters relative to long-term care. As an example, would be that when the government is criticized, and rightly so, and goes on over a period of time, and then they come in and with great public relations fanfare, you think a lot of Nova Scotians are thinking, well, they're going to deal with this issue, they're going to solve this problem. But what they do is a half measure. So we've seen it with long-term care, a half measure not only in what they do now, but a half measure in the timeline that they go well beyond election, the next election time, even several years down the road before the benefits would be realized. So they're being very cautious, and they're realizing that, and they're testing waters, I would think, as to how much they can get away with. They're not going to give away the store, even though we know that they have had an extra $1 billion of revenues coming into this government. I guess sometimes one would have to wonder where it has sort of flittered away and disappeared. Certainly has not been in some of the effectively used, Mr. Speaker. So this government is the government that's committed that it would to consult, that it would listen to Nova Scotians, protect consumers, and ensuring that there would be some stability, at least in the automobile insurance market, where most of the problems seem to be arising. But what is here today is a half measure, and more must be done, and it should have been done. So were we surprised, Mr. Speaker, that the minister did not really address the issue and deal with it forthrightly? Not at all, Mr. Speaker, because there was a missed opportunity here. The last year or more has been wasted, Mr. Speaker, by this government and the other party as well, in not involving themselves in the process of an all-party committee like it's been done in other provinces, including New Brunswick, our neighbor. And if you really truly want to consult with people, Mr. Speaker, that could have been done. That was the road to go. I've been, in my time in the legislature, I've been on those types of committees. I've really enjoyed them. Made friendships with, long-lasting friendships with members in the other parties. And an all-party committee often really does improve the function of the adherence to the rules and procedures of this House. Friendships develop, and I would like to think that solutions are found by working together in that type of environment. That would truly be a consultative process where people wouldn't have to travel long distance and come into law amendments to address Bill 45, but the all-party committee would have gone to regions throughout this province, and we certainly know that in rural Nova Scotia they're negatively being impacted by the increased insurance rates, particularly automobile insurance, where an automobile in rural Nova Scotia, places like Port Batoon that I grew up in, is certainly no longer a luxury. And many of the services are not only provided, and necessary health services are not only provided in the nearest town that's 12 miles away, but also to further in other parts, actually in other counties. So, Mr. Speaker, these matters of increased insurance rates, especially relative to the automobile insurance, has hit Nova Scotians hard, particularly seniors in rural Nova Scotia. So we're looking at many people have received already these increases. Even with the retroactive date here, will not have any impact at all on those that have received increases in the early parts of 2003. This insurance amendment may leave many Nova Scotians to turn to the insurer of last resort, and we know, Mr. Speaker, that has happened. And that is the group that are threatening, and our information is that they're threatening that they will not renew or they will not offer new insurance. And that is problematic, and will demand other actions on this government to address that particular issue, particularly if this legislation does not cover that particular issue. The full solution is wanting, Mr. Speaker. It's not an easy matter. It's a balance of rights of persons to litigate, to appear before the courts, to feel if they've been unjustly dealt with in any way, that they have access there. So that's the balance. But there are ways around that, Mr. Speaker, and there's other matters that of fraudulent nature that demands attention. I think if the issue is of the soft tissue issues, if those large awards are being given and non-deserving, well, that is a matter that, to me, should be able to be addressed if all parties sincerely want to get together. And I'm thinking of the lawyers and the industry, consumers, the government, everyone that has a part to play in this. If that is truly what the issue is, whether it's a balance on a cap on the tort system or however it's done, then these are issues that have to be looked at. And that's matters that an all-party committee would have done, Mr. Speaker. We would have had a year's information from an all-party committee, and that would been very valuable for debate here. I wish I had a report of an all-party committee in Nova Scotia like I have the report here of the all-party committee in New Brunswick. And they get on with the issue, and I expect they will be dealing with it in a much more balanced approach because of that, Mr. Speaker. Freeze and rate in insurance doesn't prevent insurance companies from not renewing or refusing to do business in Nova Scotia. That's the other issue, the issue of expanding business or companies coming in. This well may freeze be a negative on that, Mr. Speaker, because they may really just watch and feel that there's control going to be imposed on them, even if they were going to just be very modest in the increase. We understand from time to time there has to be increases in fees. This government certainly has used it this time very much. Their revenues are $1 billion now increase, and a large part of that, Mr. Speaker, was increase in fees, taxes, and all the others. So, while this government would like to give the appearance that it's taking a careful and a very thoughtful, balanced approach, and it's well planned, and they don't want to rush into anything, that is the image that they would like to give. What it is really, it's a delaying, it's a lack of decision-making, and it's a lack of leadership. They've had over a year, Mr. Speaker. This government has had over a year to have a plan. So it's only really when they get pushed to the wall, this government avoids making the difficult choices. The Premier likes to say day after day in question period, we've made the tough choices and we've made the tough decisions and that's not true, Mr. Speaker. They have not. And when they come in with a half measure, a delaying tactic, just wait and see, get us over the next election, see if we can sort of transition over the bump in the road that's called the next election. And I said they've done that in several areas, long-term care being the one that I noticed the most, particularly where they've addressed part of the issue now, but the large part, the real solution to the problem being owed to year 2007 or some such time. The anti-smoking legislation, Mr. Speaker, would be another example of this government doing with this legislation what it did with the anti-smoking. And it just allowed disarray to take place throughout the relationship with municipal units. And now they're bringing in legislation in another act, Mr. Speaker, that's before the House under the Financial Measures Act to rescind or override bylaws of municipal units. So when you stall and you don't make the decisions, there's a time when the population's ready, or there's a time when the need is there that the consumers, the people of Nova Scotia, need decisions made. And this was over this past year, and this government had the time and certainly would have the cooperation of the parties of all members of this House to deal with legislation that would in fact do the right thing and do what's right and just for those persons that are seeing major increases in automobile insurance, and also cancellation of home insurances, packages being canceled, Mr. Speaker, that threatening the very livelihoods and the well-being of Nova Scotians and their complete families. So they say, this government did say that they wanted input from consumers, business, and the insurance industry on auto insurance reform. And they could have done that over this last year, and particularly supplemented by the all-party committee. Instead, the rates went up last year, went up this year, and Nova Scotians are going to have to pay for those higher rates on an ongoing basis unless relief is at hand. People are very hopeful that something will be done, that they can't believe the increases up to $3,000 on automobile insurance from less than $1,000 in some cases. So the cooling off period that is here now until the reform process is the reform process comes in and impacts on out of control rates. Is it working? Will it work? Right now, we're already seeing breaks in the armor. Some people are saying the legislation is such that you can drive a truck through it, and it's not been tested yet. So be very interesting what happens in law amendments, Mr. Speaker, and the representation that Nova Scotians will have the opportunity to come forward and speak there and see what they think of this legislation, and if this is what they see will address their particular needs. The member from the NDP caucus asked if I'd share my notes, and so maybe they will have a plan eventually, Mr. Speaker. Maybe they'll tell us where they stand on public auto insurance and all of those things. They refer to their brothers and sisters out west, but they don't seem to want to adopt all their programs. But then again, of course, we know they've lost the moral high ground this term here in this House when they and people, particularly in Peninsula Halifax that I speak with, are very upset with them passing on the high ground on the tax, the 10% tax cut issue, and so they're probably looking for a new program. So I will share my notes with the honourable member, because I'm sure he reads everything I say in Hansard daily, I'm sure. Those that received the increases earlier in this year, though, Mr. Speaker, those people are not going to be happy. It's like the $155 check that's going out. Some people, $155 is important to all of us, but there are going to be those that do not get that check. They're not going to be happy. So these people that back in the month of March received market increase, maybe over 100% increase in their automobile insurance rates for no fault of their own, no at-fault accidents. Maybe they're older, maybe their automobile's a little older, but nobody seems to be sharing that information with them. I personally find it very difficult to find specifically why these rates are increasing. Certainly, the insurance industry is too smart to tell you, well, it's because of your age. They won't even share their statistics that they have. We talk about openness of government. Well, certainly the industry has been very closed on this matter, and they've been very sensitive about the not being age discriminatory, which they, on the surface, looks like they obviously have been, particularly youth and seniors. So we're waiting, Mr. Speaker. The government said it wanted to consult, really. It didn't adopt the NDP solution of the postcard that you tick off whether you think your insurance rates are too high or not. I imagine that was a blush of the obvious. However, this government chose not to do that, but they do want to hear from Nova Scotians, they say. But we know, Mr. Speaker, that even with the Premier's talk today about an election not taking place in May, I think his comments were exactly, or something of that nature, that we know it's very close, and daily announcements that are leading up to that. So you don't have to be too cynical, Mr. Speaker, to point out that this stalling so-called solution, which is not a solution at all, is a bit of a stalling tactic, but will, on auto insurance particularly, will allow the government to get through the next election, and with the promises, with probably some sort of announcements during the election. So while some Nova Scotians may be impacted by the freeze on rates, one has to question where are initiatives to deal with those who had increases last winter or even earlier in this spring, and what will happen post-January the 1st in the year 2004. What will happen there? Will we hear before the election what exactly is the plan? Because, again, this is half measure, like the anti-smoking legislation and the long-term care solution, so-called solutions to both of those. It's just, we've just not only stood still on issues like anti-smoking legislation, but we're just going behind daily as bits and pieces of this act is chipped away at, the Nova Scotian Act. And in addition, other provinces such as Prince Edward Island are coming forth with legislation that is comprehensive. So they will use this, Mr. Speaker, and going door to door and during the election campaign to say, look, we understand, we've listened to you, we've consulted with you, we've taken your advice, and we are doing something. We are actively doing something. We've brought in the legislation here, and we're telling those bad insurance companies that they can't do this and they can't do that. And this, Mr. Speaker, that's yet to be proven as to what will be able to be addressed within this legislation. But are Nova Scotians going to buy that, Mr. Speaker, when they go door to door and tell them we've really addressed your concerns? People of Nova Scotia expected more from this government. They expected some action and a comprehensive plan. And we're not a wealthy province, Mr. Speaker. And there are many people on fixed incomes that cars are not a luxury. It's not something they have to take vacations in, and that it's to get to pharmacies, buy their groceries, get to health care, which I say the services now has moved miles and miles away from them many times. What about the people on dialysis? And we have seniors driving each other for services like dialysis and that. And that's very real to those people. They can't do without that automobile. So it's not a tax on the luxury, and but it's certainly a tax on the poor. These people deserve good insurance, Mr. Speaker. They expect it, and they deserve it, but they want it and they expect it at reasonable premiums. According to StatsCan, Mr. Speaker, this province has the second highest insurance rates in the entire country. So that's why we asked, Mr. Speaker, for the all-party committee to address this issue, have the barristers and have the insurance industry and have all Nova Scotians appear that to review the issue and following that, have the government take some action. And that would be supportable by the evidence from an all-party committee. But that wasn't good enough, Mr. Speaker. The government said no, and the NDP said no. They had no intention of cooperating to address insurance rates, increased premiums for Nova Scotians. So what's the result? The result is what we have today. The result we have is 1 year later, you have people are paying out of control premiums, and there's no hope in sight that they will certainly be decreased. Those that prior to May the 1st had to sign on the line. And there's a very big question mark for after January, the coming January in the new year, as to what they'll be dealing with. So we've 1 year later that the two parties that wouldn't consult on an all-party committee are still saying that they should be consulting, and they have consulted, and they table this phone call and that phone call and all that, but it's very much of a disorganized, disjointed consultative process for Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians expect better, and they deserve better. So this is what we told the government and the NDP to do last year, and they failed to listen, and the results that Nova Scotians essentially still have no relief for their increased out-of-control premiums, particularly in auto insurance. I would suspect, Mr. Speaker, and rightly so, that at this juncture that Nova Scotians really are saying the time for consultation is over, and they want some action. And when they look at Bill 45, Mr. Speaker, they're going to find that action is wanting. This is it's a measure to control the flood of criticism that this government has received for its inaction, and Nova Scotians deserve better, Mr. Speaker. The people of Nova Scotia are sometimes slow to react, but I think they're very deep in their thoughts, and but they elect governments to act, and they want to see action, and they know when the stalling tactics, choices aren't being made, difficult decisions aren't being made. So when they have a government like this that's given to procrastination, they understand that. And exactly what we're seeing from this government. This is what we saw on the long-term care, how that was allowed to unfold before last Christmas, Mr. Speaker, when seniors were being turfed out of what had become their homes, comfortable, safe environments, turfed out, taken away to other parts of the province, put in with large numbers of people where their personal safety and their quality of care was not anything compared to what they had been receiving earlier. And it goes on, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to prolong that debate on long-term care issue, but it's still out there, and the effects are still being shown. And the people remember that, and that's a lack of action by government. It's a lack of commitment by a government that has $1 billion extra in revenues to deal with. They have the money. What they lack is the will and the way, and they've lost their way. The anti-smoking would be another example that I would use in that context. So what we're seeing essentially, Mr. Speaker, from this government is half-baked measures, half solutions. The problem, Mr. Speaker, by the time you get around to freezing the rates, Mr. Speaker, many of them have already gone sky high. And already people are being refused. The increased number that's gone into the insurer of last resort is ballooned, has skyrocketed. So you have a few amendments here that will put a part of a brake on, but it's too late for many people, and there's no clear indication of what's going to happen there, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid, and we're afraid, I think all MLAs have concerns about residents going without insurance, and there's increasing evidence that that is so. And that is certainly not right and it's not fair, other than the fact that it's also illegal. But people do out of desperation. When you push people so hard, Mr. Speaker, certain things have to give. So maybe there is another reason for half-baked measures beside the election. Inaction on the part of this government. One thing it doesn't do, Mr. Speaker, that the inaction, it doesn't jeopardize revenue for the government. And one has to ask the question, is this government, it's become addicted to VLTs and the increased monies from that, the programs that they brought in that are supposed to stop problem gambling and that sort of, those initiatives, most people that I've spoken with that are any knowledge on this subject say the changes that they brought in on VLTs have increased the addiction. And with the bells and whistles and taking the money, changing the money and all these other things, it's supposed to be marketing programs, but really essentially what has happened, Mr. Speaker, that it's added to the addiction. So while the government is addicted to VLTs, are they quickly becoming addicted to that 4% tax on insurance? And I don't exactly, well, yes, I think the figure, Mr. Speaker, for that, the government received $7 million more than they expected to receive on insurance premiums just in the last fiscal year. So those are still going on. Those aren't rolled back. Those aren't adjusted in any way, even with evidence before. And you can go to the superintendent of insurance. The superintendent of insurance sends people back to the industry sends them somewhere else. And the big thing that's coming out of all of this that strikes me and my own personal experience is where does the person go to get the right information on why they have been either refused insurance, whether they've had a $1,000 or $2,000 increase, or what? Where do they go for insurance? Sure, people will tell you, well, it's this and that and that, but I'm not sure that the right information is being given out either, Mr. Speaker. So there's a role to play there, and there's a role for government, because if it's fair and in fact is justified increase, then so be it. People will have to accept that. But it just seems terribly unfair to people all of a sudden being hit over the head with just something they just thought was a mistake when they opened their bill. So this government, Mr. Speaker, has received a windfall of monies, able to balance their budget on that if you want to, more than that. The increased $7 million, they probably won't have a surplus in their budget to that extent. So let's hope that this government is not becoming addicted to high insurance rates, but certainly those people have got to remember that back in January and February, March, April this year, those ones that had increases, they will continue, and the government will increase reaping the benefits, the $7 million extra that they reaped off of the tax that government gets off of the insurance premiums. So the insurance premium addiction problem is facing us right now. Is that the reason for this legislation, not to cover a broader range? So, Mr. Speaker, in addressing Bill 45, the kindest thing we can say, the government has introduced this legislation as a delaying tactic. It's there in action that has allowed this sore to fester and blister, and that's the issue that we have here today, and again, a half-baked measure. I just did briefly want to mention, and I alluded to earlier, the high-profile campaign that's being run by the NDP, but with very little substance. But it's very interesting. This has been, again, the tactic of the NDP, has been to go very public with a high-powered public relations program funded, I guess, through the party, I would imagine, directly, billboards and brochures, and they did that with long-term care. But the interesting thing was they created sort of the issue, or they brought the issue forward, but really no real solution. And they've done the same thing again with insurance. They've asked people, do you think your insurance rates are too high? Yes or no, sort of thing, et cetera, et cetera. That was really quite challenging. And that was to be their consultation. So I guess that is their definition of consultation, and it's a little different than what we had in mind when we suggested the all-party committee, Mr. Speaker. So how can a party like that issue a survey with a question like, do you feel your insurance rates are too high, yes or no? Please tick one or the other. And how does that constitute consultation? So I'm not going to dwell on this, Mr. Speaker, because the previous speaker challenged me to take the high road or stay on the high ground and not turn into a McCarthyism type search or whatever. So I've taken his advice, but I mean, we don't want to go back to that era. But when you smell something wrong, Mr. Speaker, you have to find out where the smoking gun is and what is the issue here. And the government, rather than become part of the solution, has really introduced legislation, Bill 45, that has created more of a problem. It's a delaying tactic. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't have a lot more. I can now share my notes with the honourable other member, and I had very good advice last evening by the meeting that we attended with the IBANs the honourable members referring to. But it was a great sharing of information, and I think that's the type of information that should be shared more, Mr. Speaker, and more of a meaningful consultation that is accompanied by facts and some knowledge and addressing the issue. There's immediate necessity for a solution now, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotians can't wait. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, I would just say that I thank the host for the opportunity to spend some time this afternoon on this important matter. It's a matter that we know that it is important to Nova Scotians. It's a matter that is a great concern to our caucus. As caucus chair, I can say that my folder I brought it with me today. This is a sort of folder that I've been building over the last few years. Back earlier on, when I look over some of my notes that I made in my constituency office, meeting with delegations from the either insurance industry or some of my constituents, I had no idea that in this year that we'd be facing the astronomical increase in premiums, particularly on auto insurance, that we're facing here today. So it is an emergency. We're not having an emergency debate, but this is an emergency matter that affects particularly people on fixed incomes, seniors, and youth, and it's extremely important. I know it's an issue that the whole country is grappling with, but we can be leaders here, Mr. Speaker. We have a lot of catching up to do, and Bill 45 is not going to put us in a leadership role. It's bought some time for the government, the next election, but when I look back over the issues, let's get this one behind us. Let's deal with this particular issue, because on matters of insurance, there's always issues. And I think what the saddest thing for me about this whole thing is that when I discuss with either the industry or the consumer regarding insurance in my office over the last 10 or 20 years, Mr. Speaker, basically there's been many positive stories. Families that have lost their home, or they've had break-ins, or automobile in accidents, some injuries, sometimes even death of a family member. And generally speaking, people have been quite pleased with that until this breakdown of relationships and breakdown of common sense, even, if you will. Because if soft tissue injuries are the problem, let's deal with that. If fraud's the problem, let's deal with that. If there's a cost for you get your car fixed with insurance or you pay cash, then there's a difference there. We'll deal with that. There's something wrong with that system. We can't have a parallel system. But so all the good stories have been lost. We've had a break-in at our home. We received excellent service from the insurance people. But then, but you turn around and you have a $2,000 increase in your car insurance premium, then I think the consumer needs some explanations on that. And they don't need a lot of political rhetoric. What they need is action, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I will conclude my comments on Bill 45. Thank you.
The member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to have an opportunity to stand in my place and speak on Bill 45, the Insurance Act. I'm, like most members in this House, I suspect I'm getting a fair amount of correspondence from people in my constituency who are expressing their views about this particular piece of legislation. And, you know, people are asking a lot of questions about it, and they certainly are expressing the view that they don't want a stopgap half measure, Mr. Speaker, and they're somewhat concerned that this, in fact, is what this bill is. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying that I'm one of the people who really wishes I didn't need a car. I only own and operate a vehicle grudgingly, Mr. Speaker, mostly because as an MLA, we pack so many events into our daily schedule that it's almost impossible, Mr. Speaker, to meet your commitments unless you have your own vehicle. And I attempted for a short period of time last year, starting on Car Free Day, to unload my car and use public transportation, use taxi services, and it was very difficult, as you can imagine, Mr. Speaker. Some mornings I might have to be here for 8 o'clock meeting, and then back to my constituency at 11, and back down here for 12, and back to the constituency at 6 or 6:30. And by the time you do this kind of moving around in a day, a vehicle really is the only way to do it. And so that puts you in the situation, Mr. Speaker, of having to have a vehicle. And I would imagine, Mr. Speaker, you and maybe other members of this House have read that book, On a Clear Day You Can See General Motors. And there are many books have been written on the automobile industry and the stranglehold, really, that this industry has had on urban planning, on transportation policy, even on environmental policy, Mr. Speaker. So although North Americans and in fact people in the West have quite a love affair with the automobile, it comes with a huge cost and a huge impact to our environment, to our lifestyles, and we can see with the situation that people are facing, trying to be able to pay not just the costs associated with owning and operating the vehicle itself, but insuring the vehicle. It's unbelievable with these skyrocketing insurance rates. Mr. Speaker, I have a very close family member who who is employed in the insurance industry. And some time ago, when I was having a conversation with her, she told me that Nova Scotia and New Brunswick were among the two most unregulated markets in Canada, and that you can go to other provinces, Alberta, Ontario, where there is a much greater deal of public regulation for auto insurers. And then, of course, Mr. Speaker, you have the provinces of Saskatchewan, Manitoba.
Order, please. Order, please. Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, you can go to other provinces like Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and British Columbia, and even the province of Quebec, Mr. Speaker, where they have public systems. In Quebec, they have a hybrid, public and private. But, Mr. Speaker, the situation in this province since the spring of 2001 really has gotten to the point that a crisis is occurring throughout our province for people who are in the position of having to operate motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, we probably, all of us here in the spring of 2001 had letters from, I know I did in my constituency. I had a letter from a member of the insurance industry who wrote me or emailed me and introduced herself and said she was a constituent of mine working in the industry, and that she would like an opportunity to come meet with me, and that this was a process that the industry was going through. They were matching MLAs to constituents who worked in the industry. And so I responded to her request for a meeting, and she came and met with me in my constituency office. And at that time, she told me that there would be some rate increases, and they were providing information to MLAs to let us know that rate increases were coming. And at that time, she indicated that the reason for this was the cost to the insurance industries to settle soft injury claims, and that more information would be provided. Well, Mr. Speaker, at no time in that meeting was there any inkling, did I have any inkling of the extent to which insurance costs would be increased. I thought, you would see a gradual rate increase, Mr. Speaker, maybe 5%, even maybe 10%, Mr. Speaker, which, I would consider still substantial. But in no way did I anticipate a 65% increase in insurance premiums. That wasn't part of the information that was provided to me. Now, I've thought a lot, as most people have, about what, in fact, is driving the skyrocketing insurance rates. And the industry are pushing this line that the reason for increasing insurance rate increases in the automobile sector is this matter of litigation where there is soft tissue claims. And the industry would like to see us go to a no-fault system where, in fact, the lawyers are removed from the process, and soft tissue injury is no longer a mitigating kind of circumstance with respect to insurance rates. But, Mr. Speaker, I've thought about this a fair amount, and I think what I find hard to reconcile in terms of the industry's claims around this rationale for increasing rates is why then are we seeing the same kinds of rate increases, really quite substantial rate increases in insurance in other areas, in property insurance, both commercial and private. And Mr. Speaker, I can give you an example from my own situation. My MLA office is in the Bloomfield Centre on Agricola Street. It's in a building that's owned and operated by the Halifax Regional Municipality. It's a building in which there's excellent security. It's a building where there are video cameras on the parking lots at all times and throughout the buildings, and there are people who monitor what's occurring around the building. In the 5 years that I have had a constituency office at Bloomfield Centre, to my knowledge, there has never been a break-in into that building or into any of the other offices in the building. And when I opened my constituency office there, I did as I would imagine most people do. I called around and I got some different rates of insurance to insure the contents of my office. And for the first 3 years that I was in the Bloomfield Centre, I paid a little bit more than $400 annually for office insurance. Well, Mr. Speaker, I was flabbergasted when last year I got my insurance renewal for my office.